Good evening and welcome everyone to this workshop at our Compassion Film Festival 2021 online celebration of Healing Together. We're very excited to be hosting this wonderful workshop with two amazing individuals. So I get the pleasure of introducing to you them both. So we have Lauryn Maloney-Gepfert, and she has quite a credential list here that I'm so excited to bring to your attention. She's a graduate of Yale University School of Medicine and is a certified physician's assistant. She also holds an MFA in movement and kinesiology, and she's been a body worker for almost 5 decades. Here tonight, she's representing and directing the Neuroplastic Functional Institute, and she's also started a nonprofit called Healing Out Loud Institute, which is to help underprivileged people get the training that we will all be going through tonight, called Neuroplastic Functional Training. So welcome, Lauryn. We're so excited to have you here.
Hi, Aaron.
Also with us tonight is Adam Lavender. He's a participant and practitioner within the Neuroplastic Functional Institute. So in 2012, Adam suffered a fall while building and riding a mountain bike slope style course. And the vertical impact, it caused his C4 vertebra to burst, and it left him as an incomplete quadriplegic from the neck down. Adam is a veteran healer, and here tonight, he's also a neuroplastic functional trainer. So welcome, Adam.
Thanks, Aaron. Glad to be here.
It's really wonderful to have you both here. I know there's a very in-depth presentation waiting for us, so I will turn it over to you. For those of you who are joining us in person online for this live broadcast, you can chat into the chat room, either questions or comments. I will be relaying those into the meeting at the very end, where Lauryn and Adam will have time, hopefully, to answer some of those. We're thinking about the last 8 minutes. So we'll be here for about an hour, and hope you enjoy and hope you learn something and get a toolkit for this neuroplastic functional training. Thank you both.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you for all your hard work for putting this whole film festival together. It's my passion. Love is my passion. And so what I'm going to bring to you tonight is I'm going to bring some training in this toolbox, Neuroplastic Functional Training, which has to do with neuroplasticity, kinesiology, and life education. And so what our topic is perfecting love by removing fear. And what I wanted to do is bring some science about how our brains are actually designed to operate and learn in love. And when you get into this information, I'm going to share my screen with you. I want you to begin to learn in a rich environment. And so what that means is that there's going to be a lot of repetition. I'm going to take you through this technique, and you're going to do a see, say, do process with me. So I'm going to have you at home doing this process with me. And I want you to just relax, because neuroplastic functional training is done without any threat. And that's how we optimize mapping or creating a new map in our brain. So most important, we're going to go over the 3 rules of learning whenever you learn NFT. The first rule is it's impossible to make a mistake. If you knew it already, you wouldn't be learning it. So just let that land for a minute. Whenever you go in to learn something, you want to learn without a threat, and you want to go into it thinking that you know nothing, and you're just an empty and blank canvas. Rule number 2 is don't compare apples to oranges, because it's fruitless. What I've found over my career in the healing arts is that when we compare ourselves to somebody else, what happens is judgment exists. And where judgment exists, healing can't happen. Now, the third rule is, in order to learn, you just have to do something new over and over and over again. So we're going to operate within those 3 rules tonight. And I want you to engage in this process. NFT is an actionable process. So you have to actually do it, not just observe it, to be able to have it land and to be able to take it home. My goal is for you to take it home. My goal is to give you a toolbox. And at the end of this presentation, the PowerPoint presentation, we're actually going to give you a template so that you not only have the presentation, have Adam's wisdom, but you can go home with what we call an NFT audio tape, which is an audio template that you'll be able to listen to over and over and over again that has to do with perfecting love by removing fear. So I hope everybody's going to jump in with me, and I'm just going to share my screen with you now, and then we'll begin. There we go. Okay, so what we have is we have foundations in neuroplastic functional training. So this is where science and healing are married. We don't need my bio because Aaron already gave it to you. So our objective is to introduce you to NFT and to give you a toolbox. Now try not to, as you're learning this presentation, when you get some of these science truths and some of these life education truths, what we normally do in our old model of learning is we try to hang on to them. We try to memorize them. Try not to worry about memorizing them. First and foremost, this is going to be taped. Aaron is going to put it up, and you can revisit it as many times as you want, because it will be up for you to go back and see. And the second thing is we're going to try to learn tonight without trying to memorize anything. We're going to see what happens if we just do the see, say, do process, how much we can actually take home without the pressure of trying to keep something. We're just going to let our brain do what it does by design. Okay, so NFT is basically an educational method. While it can be used in a clinical environment and providers can learn it, you can do it with any health care process that you are involved in. It can be, and was my vision to develop it, to be a marriage between alternative and allopathic or traditional medicine. So you don't have to stop taking any medications. You don't have to stop any of the practices that you are doing. NFT teaches you how to change your brain, and so change an outcome. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to prepare our brain. And the first thing you need to know is that you are in charge. This whole process that I'm going to teach you tonight is about partnering with the body. It's about being able to climb into your vehicle and appreciate that this is the only thing you will ever have jurisdiction over. We don't have jurisdiction over anyone else. We only have jurisdiction over ourselves. Therefore, to be able to change you and to be able to change your physical being, to be able to make changes in your life that are useful, that's all yours. And when we understand that you're in charge, or that when we use that principle of being in charge, it gives us complete responsibility. And we don't have to shift it to anybody else. What it does is it makes us enter into autonomy to reach our optimal state of health. Okay, so going from there, what does NFT teach you? It teaches you 3 things. It teaches you how to learn. I'm going to show you the science of how your brain learns, how it learns in love, and why we're designed that way. I'm also going to show you what the inhibitors are to neuroplasticity, which is our brain being able to change itself, and to learning. Second, what we want to do is we want to know how. How do we change? How do we self-regulate? So the second thing that NFT teaches you is to self-regulate. And you'll find as you look at some of this research that universally we have trouble with self-control. So other things, willpower, synonyms for self-regulation. And I believe that one of the reasons we have that difficulty is because we really don't know how to do it. There isn't an education to show us how our brain is designed, how our body is designed, and how we can compatibly work with the self and train to be able to change an outcome. And the last thing is that it changes outcomes. Okay, so what is NFT comprised of? 3 things. It's comprised of neuroplasticity, kinesiology, and life education. So now we're going to jump into the process, and my colleague and my friend, Adam, is going to assist me to teach you the see, say, do process. But before we do that, I want to talk about something. So these are my cards, mirror neurons. Now, what are mirror neurons? Mirror neurons are very, very interesting. They were discovered in the 90s, and they were found in a laboratory in Italy. And the scientist who was watching monkeys, basically, macaque monkeys, found that while they were hooked up to fMRI or functional MRI, they were just trying to see what kind of movement behaviors they had and what their thoughts were for different tasks. While eating lunch, one of the laboratory persons picked up an apple and began to eat it. And they could see that the monkeys were doing the same thing. Now, they weren't actually imitating the action, but in their brain, they were seeing it. They were making themselves do the action. Now, mirror neurons, by definition, are cells in our brain that fire when we do an activity. They also fire when someone else is doing an activity. And even if we are completely in stasis, our brain will tell us how to do what that person is doing. That's really profound, because even when they did an activity outside the room and the monkeys could hear it, they fired that action. So what does that mean? It means that while we think, do as I say, not as I do, it's simply not true. And how is that going to relate to love? It's my favorite thing about the brain. What we do and how we change ourselves is making someone else in their brain do that same thing all the time. Now, there's a lot of different processes that are happening when we're learning, but this particular aspect of how the brain is designed is really huge. Because what it means is if I change me, I change you. It means if I take responsibility to get rid of the things that inhibit love in my life, and I do that in front of you, you make you do it. Now, how that lands, we're not sure. Behavioral scientists believe that mirror neurons are responsible for things like empathy. It allows us to read other people, to feel what they're feeling. But what I want to contribute to you tonight, or what I want to give you tonight, is that you would be able to understand that when you take the time and the initiative and you know the how to change yourself, as you step into that, and as you begin to understand how to do that, and as you have an outcome that changes, that is more loving, more healing, bringing more freedom, that what happens is you bring that to somebody else, just by example. That's what it really means. And if we do that, if I change me and I change you, and I decide I'm going to remove fear, then what I'm teaching somebody else to do is I'm teaching them to remove fear. I am modeling, remove the fear. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to learn the start of how to map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it visually, auditorily, and kinesthetically. That means I'm going to do it by sight, which is why I'm freestanding here, and I'm gesturing so that you can see me in action doing it, because the activity will help you map it. So I want you to see it, I want you to hear it, and then I want you to do it. Now, what that means is if we do it visually, auditorily, and kinesthetically, what it means is that you're giving the brain a lot of input. You're taking a lot of sensory input and putting it into the brain to be able to give the brain the information you want it to have to make a change. So we use something called Selfspeak. And this is really important because all of the research demonstrates that Selfspeak is one of the quickest ways to make a map. It expedites mapping and making a change in your brain. So for example, if you take a track team and you time them and you just let them run, and at the end, you see what their times are, and then you have them self-speak the activity in a directive, like dig and claw with their foot, and they say it out loud. What will happen is you will see universally the entire team decrease its time just by saying what they're doing. So here's what I want you to do. We're going to learn the rest of this PowerPoint with the see, say, do process. Adam is going to do the Selfspeak after me. Now here's the most beautiful thing is that this Selfspeak is done in the second person, because the research demonstrates that when I hear my voice, my brain hears it as a command. And that mapping happens more rapidly and more deeply if I speak in the second person. Now, why is that? Well, if I say, I am going to the store, it's the collective of me. My body, I use soul, so it's not confused with mind. My body, my soul, and my spirit go to the store. The whole of me goes to the store. But if I say, Lauryn, you get to go to the store, now what happens is relationship. Now I am in relationship with the self, which is hugely important, because how we are in relationship to ourself, back to the mirror neurons, is mirrored to other people. And if we can learn how to say and do in ourselves, we have integrity. So what is integrity? Integrity is what you say and what you do match. Now, self-regulation is a form of integrity. So no longer am I trying to make myself do something and I don't do it, and then I feel bad about myself. Instead, I learn how I'm designed, I embrace that design, and I begin to say what I want to have happen in a directive, and then I actually teach myself to do it. Now what happens is it comes together, and I can appreciate and I can love myself because I can keep my word and I'm trustworthy. And that's a huge thing about understanding your design, when what you say and what you do match. So this is a type of mapping that happens with our sensory nervous system. So you're going to see it, you're going to say it, and then you're going to do it. And so while we're doing this process and engaging the design of the brain and the science behind it, Adam's going to follow me. And I am going to say in the second person what I want you to say. And then you don't have to worry about it. All you have to do is speak with Adam and say what I'm saying, because I'm saying it as though you would say it to yourself. All right, and I promise I'll say safe things. Okay, so we're going to learn Selfspeak, see, say, and do, the NFT process, by learning this definition. You ready, Adam?
Ready.
Okay, so neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity
Is the phenomenon that the brain can change itself.
That the brain can change itself.
Its own structure and function.
Its own structure and function.
Based on mental intention.
Based on mental intention.
And experience.
And experience.
Intrinsically.
Intrinsically.
Inside.
Inside.
And extrinsically.
And extrinsically.
Outside.
Outside.
So we're in lots of forums, right, where we Somebody speaks and then we speak back. Somebody says something and then we return. Sometimes we're in an audience. Sometimes we're in church. Sometimes we're in other spiritual forums where we are speaking and somebody is speaking back. But this is very different because you're the one training your own brain, because the voice heard by your brain changes your brain. That mental intention, that crafted mental intention or experience is going into your brain and it's changing your brain. That's what the science says. It changes the organ itself. It changes it on a cellular level. It changes the volume of your brain. So what I want you to do is we're going to say this definition as we go through the presentation. I'm going to have you see, say, and do with Adam. And what I want you to understand is as you are doing this, you're doing it to yourself. You're saying it to yourself. Now, here's the most beautiful thing about speaking to yourself. You got to be a healing rebel. Because talking to yourself in our culture means what? What's it mean, Adam? Talking to yourself.
You're crazy.
It means you're crazy. So you've got to be a healing rebel, and you've got to understand that the science is showing us something different. The science is showing us that when we have relationship with the self, and when it's done in a rich environment, when it's practiced that way and new maps are laid down, that's when we make changes. And so we've got to dispel these paradigms and cause them to just be neuroplastic interference. We just have to say, not listening to that. And I'm going to try this new thing. Now, when you speak with the Selfspeak, what I want you to do is I want you to say it to yourself. I want you to really listen. And now look at the power of this. When you're in a group, if I say to myself, you have permission to heal, and Adam says it. Go ahead, Adam.
You have permission to heal.
And Adam says it, you have permission to heal. What happens is, and this is amazing, when you think about the science and think that the science is showing us that second person self-speak, speaking in the second person to ourselves is more impactful. When you're in a group and the group says you have permission to heal, we are hardwired in our brain that if you're in a group of 10 people and you do your work and you say, you have permission to heal, and the rest of the group is doing their work and they're saying to themselves, you have permission to heal, that hardwired second person is being heard by everybody in the group as 9 other people encouraging them to heal. It's amazing. So take this as an engagement and also a communication of love. That as you are saying to yourself, you have permission to be free from fear. Go ahead and say that, Adam.
You have permission to be free from fear.
And really say it to yourself. You have permission to be free from fear.
You have permission to be free from fear.
When that lands on you, as we are saying it here, you're hearing in your brain, because you're wired that way, you have permission to heal from fear. All right, so let's go to the second part of this. So I'm going to just keep going because I've explained these neuroplastic things already. And everything in your brain is a map. Everything. It doesn't matter what behavior you have, riding a bike, talking to Aunt Martha, the way you shop in the grocery store. You have fundamentally made a map. And it has happened more deeply if you have added repetition to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at how do we impact the brain? How do we use that see, say, do process? Well, kinesiology is the study of human movement. So what I've found over the last 25 years that I've been doing this work is that if you do it in movement, it maps more quickly. Now, why is that? Because movement is the only time that we use every executive function in our brain when we're moving. So even if you're just gesturing and you follow me throughout this lecture, just gesturing, and you abandon all inhibition and you just do what this goofball woman is doing, you are going to map more impactfully. Now, that is incredible because all of the research is demonstrating that the movement piece of this, and so if you're a behavioral scientist, or if you are in the behavioral arts, if you're a counselor, or if you are a social worker, take what I'm saying very seriously. Because while you may have been learning about neuroscience, this movement piece has been absent. The eclectic background that I have has given me permission to bring this together in an integration in power. So why is that? Because kinesiology, movement, actually turns on brain-derived neurotrophin factor. When we are, which is a growth hormone for neuroplasticity and for learning. When we are moving and we exercise just all movement, that expands the production of that in our brain. So not only are we using every executive function when we move, but it becomes activity. Instead of observation, we step into it. And when we step into it, we're the doing of it. And when we're in the doing of it, what's happening in our brain is going, hey, great, let's power up the growth factors and all of the neurotransmitters that are going to raise mood levels, that are going to change perspective. Not to mention that all of the research is demonstrating that if you move 5 days a week and you consistently do a little bit of exercise, cardiovascular, 15 minutes, the research shows somewhere between 70 and 90% decrease in the risk of Alzheimer's and dementia. We can't sit still. We have to do. So this process is a doing process. And if our goal really is love, if that's what we want and we want to model the love, we want to be the love, we want to say, hey, I'm healing out loud and it's safe, then what happens is we have to do it out loud. And that means we have to move through it. So Adam's going to, at the end, tell you about some of the movement and how that changed his life, really, in doing this movement as somebody who came to it as, I have to say, a healing tetraplegic, because he is, in my book, a healing warrior. He's a veteran. So I want him to be able to talk about that a little bit more. So I'm just going to keep flying through this. All right, so what's the life education piece? We have neuroplasticity, kinesiology, and life education. Life education is self-coaching that allows us to remove the things that inhibit healing, inhibit love, and inhibit freedom. Now, what are those things? Anything that's a threat. So life education allows us to identify the threat and then be able to create a solution that we're going to use as a mental intention and an experience, and we're going to craft it through our sensory nervous system, agree with the brain's design so that we don't interrupt the optimal learning. We're going to do it in a rich environment. That means without demand. That means without criticism. That means without frustration. That means without depression, without anger. All of the things that are inhibiting. So what we're going to do is we're going to identify a problem, and then we're going to create a solution to it. And what I tell my team that I train is the solution is always the opposite of the problem. The brain has the ability to say yes and no. NFT, or Neuroplastic Functional Training, or neuroplasticity, is not positive thinking. We have to remove that paradigm if we want to embrace the way the brain works, because the brain has a yes and a no in it. It has excitatory and inhibitory functions. It upregulates and it downregulates. It's not negative or positive in the sense of this is positive thinking. It's what kind of outcome is the brain directing? Is it useful or is it not useful? Is it fear-based? and going to tap everything because it's a threat? Or is it love-based, where it's going to bear fruit and produce that which grows people, kindness, patience, encouragement? That's what we want to be able to do. We want to learn how to self-regulate yes and no. And when we self-regulate yes, we want it to really be a yes. When we self-regulate no, we want it to really be a no. We want yes and no to be two different things. We don't want to, for example, say, I am not going to do X that I do too much, but maybe I'll just do it today. We want to be able to learn how our brain will hear that directive and how we can actually make it happen, how it can be actionable. Okay, so let's go through this. So I'm going to have to look at my computer for a minute to read this list. So what I want you to do is I want you to try to identify what this particular health challenge is. The irritability or anger, fatigue, lack of interest, motivation or energy, feeling nervous or anxious, headache, feeling depressed or sad, feeling as though you could cry, upset stomach or indigestion, muscular tension, change in appetite, teeth grinding, tightness in the chest, feeling faint or dizzy, changes in menstrual cycle and erectile dysfunction. See, I'm a PA, so I just say it out loud. What is that health challenge? What we are talking about is so many of these symptoms could describe other disease processes. It could describe a myriad of what we call a differential diagnosis. These symptoms could be categorized in many different areas. But what it is it's stress. And stress, when we use the word stress, it's just a nice way of saying fear. When we say anxiety, it's a nice way of saying fear. So the question they asked this huge group of people from 2007 to 2010 was, which of the following, if any, have you experienced in the last month as a result of stress? So stress in our brain does something. It has a physical outcome, and it is not going to produce love. It's going to take us away from that. A rich environment, environmental factors can regulate the process, dramatically affect the rate at which new neurons are produced. This is from Moheb Kastandi's book, Neuroplasticity, and I think he says it so succinctly. For example, physical activity, environmental enrichment, and learning tasks enhance the proliferation of neural stem cells, and in some cases promote the survival of newborn neurons. These are cells that can do things and can become things. Whereas stress, certain types of inflammation, and sensory deprivation have the opposite effect. So what does this mean? This is beautiful because I want to talk about the epigenetics. And what epigenetics is it means in addition to or above genetics. So you have your DNA, and your DNA is what you're born with. And what we want to know is, can we actually change the way that DNA, which has license to do something, can it be interrupted or can it be changed by these epigenetic factors? And so here's this study, which is so amazing about stress and about fear. So in 2004, they did a study that showed the quality of care for rat pups. Now, some mothers were very attentive, some weren't, okay? What they found was that pups that were repeatedly licked and groomed during the first week of life were better able to cope with stress and fearful situations in adulthood. compared to those that had no or little contact with their mothers. All right, now I know we can't, lots of scientists say, oh, you can't compare rats to humans, but hello. This is what we have in our existence, in our human experience as well. When we don't get the nurturing, we don't handle stress very well. Could it be that we didn't have it mirrored to us? We're not sure. But I think it has something to do with it. Now, the epigenetic mechanisms allow nature and nurture, or genes and the environment, to interact with one another. So it provides a mean by which characteristics can be passed down generationally. Sometimes they're not, sometimes they just turn on and off these DNA processes, but sometimes in some studies, they are actually passed down through heritage. They are inherited. So the changes that we make, I change me, I mirror it, you see me change, you make you do it, but then the change can also be changing the DNA, and in some cases, that DNA can become inherited. Those changes can become inherited. So what they found was, the key finding of the research is that the epigenetic modifications and the behaviors associated with them are reversible. So we're talking about the rat pups that had no care. So when rat pups born to neglectful mothers are then fostered, this is amazing, are then loved by the attentive ones. The licking and grooming they receive removes the epigenetic marks that silence the glucocorticoid, let me say it again, glucocorticoid receptor gene. Now, the glucocorticoid receptor gene is just your fight, flight, and freeze. That's your adrenal system and your sympathetic nervous system firing up. But it's silenced so that their stress response becomes comparable to that of the pups that have received high quality care all along. Now what we have as far as the love versus fear factor is, I change me, I'm in front of you, my change in your mirror neurons makes you do it yourself. You, with your mirror neurons, are making yourself do my change. Not only is my change having an effect on your brain, but what happens is it has an effect on me, in that I may actually be changing my epigenetic markers, and research is showing that I can change it and change the way I respond in my life as a result of love. And I can pass it down. Now, we're not sure how that happens. The jury is out. There's some controversy around it, but there is research that's showing that this is happening, that you actually can change what you pass down to your children. All right, so love heals. That's what we want to know. Why? Because what we find out is that kindness, patience, and encouragement, this rich environment, is really important. Kindness is safe. Yeah? Kindness is safe. Patience is safe. Encouragement is safe. We want to be able to operate in safety and operate without a threat. So I want you to remember this. So let's NFT it. You ready, Adam?
Ready.
Say this out loud. Fear is the threat of harm.
Fear is the threat of harm.
Now say it to yourself. Fear is the threat of harm.
Fear is the threat of harm.
The threat of harm.
The threat of harm
Cannot keep you safe.
cannot keep you safe.
The threat of harm cannot keep you safe.
The threat of harm cannot keep you safe.
That makes no sense.
That makes no sense.
Because it's a threat.
Because it's a threat.
Okay, so I asked a bunch of the people that I worked with. I've kind of kept a running journal, okay? And I asked them, what makes you feel fear is good? And they say, well, it gives me motivation. It keeps me hyper-focused. It keeps me involved. It gives me something to do. It wards off harm. I actually think that when I'm worrying, I'm warding off harm. It prepares me in case harm comes. I'm prepared already. I'm already in a state of alertness. It keeps me present in an issue, and it creates a barrier. Very interesting, right? Because all of the things I just said can be self-regulated. We don't need to use our fear to motivate us. We don't need to use our fear to stay present. We don't need to use our fear to focus, because as you'll see in a few minutes, what we repeat, we map. So the more you repeat fear, the more you're mapping it. We don't want to map a threat of harm. We don't want to stay in a state of fight, flight, and freeze, because what happens in the brain is it shuts down that BDNF, that brain-deriving neurotrophin factor, the growth hormone. It shuts down all of the neurotransmitters. It causes the dendrites, the very ends of the nerve, to shrink and become thwarted, and there's less of them. It shuts down neurotransmission across this cleft between the nerves. It causes your brain to shrink. So why are we thinking that fear is good? It's a deception. It's just a deception, and it goes against the way that the brain structurally and functionally operates. So what you want to do is you want to be able to remove the fear by doing the solution, by giving the sensory input, by creating a map over and over and over and over again that says love, kindness, patience, encouragement, no fear, but you have to actively do it. It's an actionable thing. It's an activity. And you have to do it with movement. If you really want to expedite it, you can do it walking, you can do it cleaning, you can do the simplest movement to have it have impact, so that you're using all of the brain to make the change. Okay. So I already talked about the adverse effects, but what I also want to tell you is it shuts down memory. So when we're under pressure learning, when we demand, or we think, oh, well, I'm just a good procrastinator, and by the time I'm done, I work really well on a deadline. Well, you might be able to be in that hyperactive state and pump all your adrenaline up and pump all the glucocorticoids up in your brain, and you might be able to be in that hyperarousal state, able to, in the immediate play, remember, but it disappears because you're under duress. So if you want to learn, you've got to create a rich environment where you're kind and you're patient and you're encouraging, and you can do it over and over again. I say to my classes, everybody say this out loud. You ready, Adam?
Ready.
You have 1,000 times.
You have 1,000 times.
You have 1,000 times to learn that new thing.
You have 1,000 times to go on that new thing.
After that, you have 1,000 more.
After that, you have 1,000 more.
And after that, you have 1,000 more.
And after that, you have 1,000 more.
And after that, you have 1,000 more.
After that, you have 1,000 more.
Because in our culture, what we've been taught is you have to learn it the first time. If you don't learn it the first time, you're stupid. Which is ridiculous, because it is not the brain's design. So what we want to do is we want to move out of these adverse effects, understand fear is the threat of harm. And we already talked about the barriers to change. And we want to know, how do we do it? Okay, how do we actually have willpower? I just breezed by a study for the barriers to change. They asked people, what keeps you from doing what your health provider suggests? And basically, what people said was a lack of willpower. Now, a synonym for self-regulation is willpower, right? Self-control. People don't have self-control. They say one thing, they do another. And they don't know how to make that integrity happen. And you know what? None of us can love ourselves when we say one thing and do another, because that's not truthful. And we can't feel good about ourselves when we're not being truthful. So what we want to do is remove these barriers to change and embrace human design. And that's an action-based change. You have to actually do it. So we want to learn how to learn, self-regulate to change an outcome. And we already talked about all three of these things. The how is more important than the why. So this was in a study that I did with Adam and 3 other people who had serious spinal cord injuries. And we did an exercise in letting go of why the rope got tangled and just untangling the rope. You see, with neuroplasticity, it's the ability of the brain to make a map based on mental intention and experience. So if you keep concentrating on the problem, concentrating on the problem, concentrating on the loss, concentrating on the trauma, concentrating on what you don't have, you're making that map every time stronger and stronger and stronger, because neuroplasticity isn't positive thinking. Neuroplasticity is how the brain works. So the more you focus on the problem, the more you get the problem. The more you focus on the solution, the more you get the solution. And that's because nerves need a target. Okay, so I only have 2 more minutes and then I'm going to make your tape. But let me just explain this target. So what they did was, in 1940, Montalcini and Hamburger did a study, and what they did was they proposed that the nerves had to have a target tissue. So what they did to these poor little chickadees, which I feel very sorry about, but it did teach me something, is they removed their wings in the embryonic state. And what happened in the brain was the nerves did not grow to the wings because there wasn't a target. There wasn't an end organ. When they put them back on, the nerves began to grow towards the target. So what does that mean? That means you have to utilize a target. This picture is from the study that Aaron was in. And what we did was we painted all of the people's toes and fingers in the whole team. There were 17 of us that were learning the technique, and then 4 people who were healing from spinal cord injury. And we painted all of our fingers and our toes exactly the same way. And as we were teaching people to see, say, and do, and embrace the way the brain worked in a rich environment so that they were saying, finger move, and they were doing these processes, what happened was, because they had this target of the colors, it was very definable for them. It was an extrinsic target. Okay. So healing is monodirectional, and you have to understand that that's your brain. You have to have a target. If you don't have a target, the nerves and the brain do not reach there to get it, okay? And so what you need to do is you need to create that target. In this particular situation, what we're doing is we're saying love is our target. We're saying yes to love and no to fear. And what we want to do is look at the principles that shut down the fear in our brain, and that's the solution, and operating in a rich environment. So I'm just going to explain neuro relaxation to you. because I've explained a lot of this. So we're just going to go to neuro relaxation. So when you learn neuro relaxation, when you're doing meditation, when you're doing prayer, when you're doing yoga, it's applicable in that you dial the body down, and from that state, you go into neurodifferentiation, which allows you to be able to say this, not that. So you can't do it in a hyperactive state. Thinking that fear is going to rev you up and make you prepared is a deception. When you go into that deep, profound relaxation, and you do it the way it's going to be done, you have neurotransference, which means that you can take this relaxation, and what it does in your brain is it opens your brain up so you can make a choice, this, not that, because you're not in a fight, flight, and freeze mode in your sympathetic nervous system. All right, so I want to get into here, and we're going to look at, this was a meta study done by Klein and Jones, and what they did was they defined from all of these studies that they read on neuroplasticity, what were the fundamental core principles that existed in all of them. The first one was use it or lose it. So I want you to say this out loud. You ready, Adam? Use it or lose it.
Use it or lose it.
Okay. Now, what we want to do is not use what is going to be a threat. Use it and improve it. That's you, Ad. Use it and improve it.
Use it and improve it.
We want to use and improve and directly focus on and ignore, actually ignore the fear and focus monodirectionally on the kindness, patience, and encouragement. Okay? And then specificity. We want to be able to make it really specific. The more specific we can make our focus, the more single pointed, the more deliberate, the more the brain understands what you want. Repetition is one of the biggest factors. You do it over and over and over and over again. You say no out loud, see, say, and do it. No to the fear, yes to this monodirectional focus. And eventually what happens in about 21 days is the brain starts to make a shift. And that shift gets this, because intensity and what you focus on is what the brain grabs. Saliency, if it's important, the brain will grab it. And if it's done over time, it becomes permanent. And that's where you automate the change. I automate my change. I automate fearlessness. I automate the love that I'm reaching for. I automate it because it's a target. And eventually it becomes second nature. And that's how you're designed. And not by forcing, by loving. So the last one is age. Age you can deliberately choose better one way than the other. And transference. One of these is just like the other. If you learn this process, taking one problem and making a solution, you can apply it to anything. Your brain will immediately go, oh, this is just like that. And then interference, we're not listening to that. We're not listening to the interference, which is competitive neuroplasticity that tries to keep us from the love. Anything that's a threat, you have to deliberately, actively, in movement, shut it down. And then the last thing is nerves that wire together, fire together. Wiring and firing is when you come together initially in an activity, riding a bike, and your brain is going, oh, this has to work with that, this has to work with that. And it's slow, and then it gets faster, and then boom, you just get on the bike, and it's automated. All right, so that basically is our goal. And that's how, those are the principles we're going to use in this tape we're going to make for you. So I'm a couple minutes behind, but I really think it's important for you to make the tape. And then I'm going to have Adam field questions until Aaron turns us off. Okay, So what I want you to do is take out your phone, and you should have your phone somewhere around you. If not, don't get nervous. Don't worry, because you can always listen to this online and you can tape it from the video. Okay, so if you don't have your phone, you can just wait. You can just relax. You can just do this process. So I'm going to give you a template to take home that you can do in movement to make this change and to integrate all of these principles so that you can have that target, perfecting love and eliminating the fear. All right, so I'm just going to begin because it will be on the video. You can also tape it from the beginning, the video. And Adam is going to repeat after me. Ready, Adam?
Ready.
Okay. Self.
Self.
Listen to your own voice.
Listen to your own voice.
You're in charge.
You are in charge.
You're the one that makes the change.
You are the one that makes the change.
You have permission to heal.
You have permission to heal.
You have permission to move away from the threat.
You have permission to move away from the threat.
You weren't designed for the threat.
You weren't designed for the threat.
The threat does not help you.
The threat does not help you.
You do not have to keep the threat.
You do not have to keep the threat.
Self.
Self.
You get to take it seriously.
You get to take it seriously.
You get to relax.
You get to relax.
And from this point forward,
And from this point forward,
you get to move in freedom.
you get to move in freedom.
You don't have to criticize.
You don't have to criticize.
You get to partner.
You get to partner.
You get to partner with the self.
You get to partner with the self.
You get to operate in kindness.
You get to operate in kindness
And in patience.
and in patience
And in encouragement.
and encouragement.
You get to ignore the judgment.
You get to ignore the judgment.
You get to ignore the fear.
You get to ignore the fear.
You get to use and improve the target.
You get to use and improve the target.
You get to use and improve exquisite listening.
You get to use and improve exquisite listening.
You get to listen.
You get to listen.
You get to see.
You get to see.
And you get to do.
And you get to do.
And you have permission to grow forward.
And you have permission to grow forward.
You have permission to advance.
You have permission to advance.
You have permission to have what you say.
You have permission to have what you say.
And what you do match.
And what you do match.
And you don't have to be stopped this time.
And you don't have to be stopped this time.
You do not have to keep the fear.
You do not have to keep the fear.
Because it's a lie.
Because it's a lie.
It's not useful.
It's not useful.
The kindness,
The kindness,
the patience,
the patience,
and the encouragement,
and encouragement,
they're useful.
they're useful.
And you get to embrace the design of your brain.
You get to embrace the design of your brain.
And you don't ever have to go back.
And you don't ever have to go back.
You get to only go forward.
You get to only go forward.
Monodirectionally.
Monodirectional.
Exclusively.
Exclusively.
In love.
In love.
Thank you very much. Okay, Aaron, we moved right up to the marker. So Aaron's coming back on, and I'm not sure I might have to answer your questions offline. He might have to send your questions to me. I might have to email you. Are you coming back, Aaron?
It's wonderful. Thank you both very much. I did just put the questions into the chat. Perhaps there's just a few minutes if you would like to take to answer the questions, that'd be fine. So
I'd like to turn it over to Adam so that he can do that.
Adam, do you see the questions there?
I don't yet.
I can read them to you. So the first question comes from the audience, and it is, what does compassion mean to you?
Wow. I guess to me personally, compassion is the ability to see outside of one's own needs and one's own desires, and to connect empathetically with others around them.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. There's another question here that came from the audience. It seems to be referencing something you said. So, quote unquote, we do not use fear. And then the question comes after it. So, why then do we allow society and the government to trap us in this current state of fear that we are currently living in?
You're in charge. That's what we have to do, one person at a time. Your comments, Adam?
I don't know if I'm qualified for that one. Why we allow that to happen. I think, in my personal opinion, the kernel of that is that not many people decide or are exposed to a way of thinking that leads them to take on the onus of their own healing.
Yeah.
And if people are taking on the onus of their own healing, they're less likely to look to others to fill in those blanks for them. So we're more likely to proceed in our lives with love and compassion.
Right.
If fear is not a part of our decision making.
It's not a part of our paradigm.
Right.
We don't have to give anybody else permission to have jurisdiction over us, period. We can operate in love no matter what's going on. And that's what we have to learn how to do independently.
It's beautiful. I think really well answered. I have a question just to kind of wrap up for Adam. With your work with the Neuroplastic Functional Institute, what have you noticed as far as the strides that you're making, both internally and externally? And what are some of the excitements that you have for the near future as far as this healing process?
I think what's so cool about this work is that you carry it with you in absolutely any endeavor in your life. Whether you're training, with orthopedic goals or psychological goals or spiritual goals, being mindful and operating in a place of love, not in a place of fear, it affects every little thing you do. It affects every moment of your day. For me, as a quadriplegic, one of the things that a lot of people in my situation experience are really, really strong spasms, clonus. And it's like this noise in the body that kind of builds up. And it's not an easy thing to control. It's part of your autonomic nervous system, which theoretically you're not considered to even have control over. But with some of these techniques, I've actually been able to influence my spasticity. There was one instance where I was working in the water with Lauryn, and I had been having a few bouts with autonomic dysreflexia, which is something that a lot of quadriplegics deal with. I won't go into that specifically, but it is an
uncontrollable spike of blood pressure.
Exactly, and it can be life-threatening. And I had a combination of inputs that kind of put me into that place while I was in the water one day, and through Selfspeak and visualization and mental relaxation techniques, I literally lowered my blood pressure right then and there, in a very short period of time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so and that's something that theoretically I'm not supposed to be able to do even as an able-bodied person, let alone a C4 quadriplegic. So, my thought pattern, my basic thought patterns when when I think about my goals, when I think about what I want to achieve and what I want to do for the day, I know better than to get into mental patterns of anxiety, of over anticipating things, spinning my wheels in ways where I can't gain traction. So if I just step it back a little bit, stay in a place of healing, stay out of my sympathetic nervous system, my fight or flight reflexes, and stay squarely in my parasympathetic nervous system where all healing takes place, then all my efforts mean something. All my efforts are maximized. If I'm in a state of fear, I could go about doing all kinds of things to try to regain function and to improve my quality of life, but I won't have access to any of my subtle faculties, to any of my, all your thinking is polarized when you're in the sympathetic nervous system. So that time is literally wasted. I mean, nothing you do in that environment leads to healing, leads to a permanent, impact. So this is the type of work where you don't just go to the gym and do 1,000,000 reps and let your mind wander. It's so much about mental intention and making every single little moment count as much as it possibly could count. And the only way that can happen is to be in a place of healing and to be in a mental place of healing where all that takes place. So for me, it literally plays into every little thing I do all day long. And it also helps remind me of the other exercises that I do through Selfspeak, through repetition, checking in with parts of my body that I'm trying to work on to gain function, and building, stacking the rice paper. Me and my acupuncturist call it. It takes a lot of little pieces of rice paper to get a tall stack, but you got to keep stacking the rice paper. So, it all matters. Whether you have a big jump in improvement or small incremental improvements, you have to have a goal to get somewhere, and you have to work toward that goal to get there. So, this work the life education piece is so important because it is a practice, just like, if I may, just like Buddhism is a practice, and it only helps you in as much as you engage in it and as it is important to you. And so with regard to my future goals, as I do this work more and more, I'm constantly reminded that how important it is and how important it is to keep checking in on it, to try to continue to refine my practice with it, and to keep myself in that mindful state, so that at every present moment I'm making headway on my goals. And I have athletic goals, I have goals within my family, I have independence related goals, I have artistic related goals, and every single one of my capacities and my pursuits relies on my ability to, approach them in a way that yields a fruitful result. So,
What he said.
That's what I'm saying.
What he said. Now you know why he's here.
It's beautiful.
That's beautiful, Adam. Thank you for that and for teaching me.
Really wonderful. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Adam. Lauryn, thank you so much for being here. All of you online, thank you for being here as well. Thank you for your comments and questions. Thank you for those of you who will attend this workshop in the future. This will be available until Sunday, August 22nd for viewing. So feel free to do so and share it with friends. You can also give this as a gift. It's a free workshop. So there's a little button on the screen with a heart that says give as a gift. So you can do that and send it to somebody who you think this might be useful or beneficial for, or somebody who you want to spread the love to. I've also inserted into the chat the website NFI Heals. That's Lauryn's website for her business. And so that's there for your accessing it as well. I want to thank Lauryn so much for being here and for guiding us through this beautiful practice and this understanding of how to remove fear and find more love. Adam, thank you for being here as a representation of that practice in action and for the compassion you both bring.
Thank you, Aaron. Big
Thanks,
love,
Aaron.
everyone.
Big love to you both. And we'll see you all when we're looking at you. Take care.